Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Mummey, and my guest this time around is Dr. Will Miller. Dr. Will runs The Gathering, which happens on Sundays. It happens in Lafayette, but it happens wherever you have a computer or a smartphone currently, because they are meeting online through Zoom and also on Facebook Live. If you'd like the Zoom coordinates, you can simply email me at rick.mummy@gmail.com, and I'll give them to you when I have them for the current week. Or you can find it on Facebook Live at Dr. Will's Gathering on Facebook. Will brings his breadth of experience and knowledge to these meetings on Sunday. Some biblical principles are discussed. Also, his experience as a therapist and his knowledge of cognitive therapy and how the mind works really livens up those sessions and can help you sharpen up your tools for coping with these unprecedented and chaotic times. So hang around and listen to our chat with Dr. Will Miller. Thanks. Hello, Dr. Will.
Oh, it's good to be with you, even if from very far away in COVID land.
Even from a distance, it's nice to be together. And I'm glad you're with us this morning. It's already, I'm going to let people know that it's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Arizona when we're recording this. And it's already just really hot. And one of the worst jobs I think you can have is like desert weatherman.
I've always felt that one of the worst jobs you can have is being a roofer in Arizona in August.
No possible way. Yeah, when the weather comes on the local news, they're sitting on a stool crying. That's all they do. Get me out of here.
Is there something of a rainy season there? I mean, some periods of rain?
No, they just lie about rain. No, they do. Yesterday, the weather thing on my phone said it was raining. And it was completely blue sky and searingly hot. So if it rains, it's just Charlie Brown rain. Like it just rains on a person somewhere.
Lying is a national issue these days. Just flat out, just bold-faced lying.
Wow. You know what? There are a number of national issues these days, and I don't know if we get into them specifically, but you've had done some really interesting things lately, both in The Gathering and on your YouTube videos that you put out, talking about coping mechanisms for dealing with these times. And it seems to me like the basic lesson of it is, if you understand a little bit about how your mind works, that you can understand better your feelings about all of this mishigas, this crazy stuff that's going on. If you know if your wiring.
Absolutely, there's no question about it. Under that $10 term, psychoeducation, but it really is incredibly useful and insightful. You know how I start, Rick, when I talk to people. I just did one of these things, a podcast yesterday. Their interest was PTSD specifically, but it retreats back to this. We live in our moods, and if you think about human mood across a spectrum, you understand that idea of a spectrum.
Yeah.
And on one end, you have where your energy is completely collapsed, and it's depression. I mean, you just have pulled out of life, and it's depression. Okay, your energy is gone. That's very dangerous, of course, and that's a difficulty because it's hard to prompt a person out of that. Now go across that whole spectrum range all the way up to the other end, which is anxiety, where your engine is overheated, and the pathology there. The pathology on depression, of course, is taking your life. Pathology on the other end is panic attacks, which shut you down. If you hold on to that sort of idea about a spectrum, let's face it, most people today, you can find yourself somewhere in that. I'm a little bit depressive. I'm a little bit anxious, more anxiety than depression these days. And these circumstances are stepping on the gas, if you will. And there's a lot of anxiety that people are feeling. Now, what we know of the past 30 years in psychotherapy, and the buzz term is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically a strategy that works very well of taking charge of your thinking, because it's in your thinking that spins up and creates and steps on the gas of anxiety. And so that's what therapists are doing. And it's a real crisis these days, because a person who's sort of inclined to be a little anxious is having more extreme anxiety. And so what do you do in that case? And that's kind of what I talk about and deal with.
You talked about in the recent one of your more recent YouTube videos about the amygdala,
Yes.
and that it regulates this fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And I've always been fascinated by that because it's so primal. We can't get away from that.
Nope.
We have that wiring, but our primitive selves got to act out. You actually got to fight or flee at your will. But now, for me, a great example for me is I once had an evaluation during a radio job. It was an impromptu evaluation. They just called me out of the hallway and said, "Come here," and started in on me. And I wasn't allowed to speak. But
Wow.
yeah, don't say anything. Oh, all right. And they took off on me. And at that particular juncture, I would have really relished the ability to either cave someone's head in or
Mm-hmm.
run away. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do either of those things. And
Yep.
that's what I think sort of brings us some modern misery with that.
There's no question about it. And it's a great example because sometimes what people forget, sometimes they think fight or flight and they don't think about freeze. And freeze is obviously when little children are faced with this, they have no choice but to freeze. But then after a while, they may grow up with an inclination. The amygdala is really an amazing, it is our primitive brain. Amygdala is just a Greek word for almond because it's in the brain. It looks like an almond.
I think I knew
And
people named that when I grew up in the region there.
so if you point to your earlobe right in front of your ear, it's in the brain, sort of in there. And this is, it's been described as the fire alarm or the siren of the brain because, first of all, if you think about your frontal cortex, point to your forehead, your frontal cortex, okay, that's the thinking part. And we rely on that mostly. The amygdala is what ignites or lights up organically. It's the oldest, from an evolutionary point of view, the oldest part of humanity. And as you say, it's saved lives. Lion, and for example, with first responders, with police officers, which is who I work with, they are trained to, their amygdala ignites their defensive system, and then they follow their training. And things like when your amygdala lights up for a fight or a flight or a freeze, your eyesight gets sharper, your hearing gets sharper, your whole organism is prepared to act for safety. It gets triggered by associations. Think about that. It gets triggered by, you see someone, take a pretty primitive, a basic example. You say you were hurt as a kid by a bully, okay? Even without your consciousness, when you see someone who looks like that bully, you might just have even a very subtle reaction of antipathy toward this stranger person because it's the amygdala going, uh-oh, that looks like Barry, the guy who,
Right.
That's very elemental example. There are far more exquisite and involved, but that's what the amygdala does. It lights up and ignites an emotional response that the frontal cortex then has to interpret. And it's really complicated, but changeable and doable. This has changed therapy because therapy used to be mostly just the cortex, just about your thinking, changing your thinking. With brain imaging and brain scans, we were able to connect how the amygdala, okay, was affecting or creating emotional response. And you're trying to outthink it or calm it down to put it back to sleep. I don't know if this is being too in the weeds here, but this is the pathway out of stress is to, here's a great example. You're anxious about something, and oftentimes anxiety is about a worry. And a worry is basically a what if. Okay, oh man, what if I get, I'm going to this restaurant. What if I get exposed? Okay, stop that thought. What if? Is that thought real? No, it's just a thought. And so one of the things we encourage people is to do something we call erase and replace. Erase that useless thought that's only making you anxious, lighting you up, and replace it with something more constructive. It could be, no, I think I'm going to be all right because we're wearing masks and there'll be some safety there. And I'm not going to worry about that beforehand as if it's going to happen. So, that's pretty fundamental. But that's what cognitive behavioral therapy is to seize control of your thinking that can run away.
And while we're on that pathway out of stress, we can take some momentary breaks, which, when strung together on a sort of daily or regular basis, can really be healthy. Even during the gathering, you take a minute or two for us to stop and close the eyes and just listen to yourself breathe. Get in the shade for a minute.
It's an excellent point. I mean, the research, the guy who's done the most research with post-traumatic stress disorder, which of course is anxiety, in the extreme, okay, talks about how talking about the trauma doesn't just, help you unwire it because it's so emotionally laden in your amygdala, really. And so the strategies that work are basically to do things like meditation, movement, being out with nature, and relaxing your organism and your body. One of the things that I tell people in my therapy practice is, when you find yourself with thoughts that are causing you to have more anxiety, well, it's easy to say, stop thinking about that. Well, how do you do that?
Right.
One of the things that seems kind of intuitive, but is amazingly underappreciated, is the power of deep breathing. When you do deep breathing, concentrating and focusing on the breathing, guess what you've done? You've stopped the thought. And so doing the deep breathing for 2 or 3 rounds, inhale to the max, exhale to the max. Do that a few times and you'll find that, okay, I can start thinking again. Should I go back to that worry? No, let's go to another place. And so you really have more control than you think you do.
So it's a shift of focus.
Bingo.
I did a post on Facebook where I asked people to tell me something they love about their hometown, either their original hometown or where they're living now. And it seemed like it was a really real breath of fresh air for a lot of people, because I got a ton of response of people remembering, oh yeah, we used to go down to the lake and fish, or we lived on a beach, or whatever. And it just seems like even a momentary shift of focus can be healthy.
Oh, no question, and absolutely. People are dying for those kinds of refreshing changes of thoughts. Now, since you brought that subject up, my entertainer, comedian friend, comic to comic, if you said that to me, what I should have done is say, oh yes, I remember in Long Island when we went to Jones Beach in the blazing sun, and we didn't have, sunblock in those days, and I just turned beet red. And then a couple of days later, I began to peel. And I said in my comedy act, it's too bad when you peeled, you didn't have a new, better look. You didn't peel away the old look and have a new look.
I could really get some good work done out here. It'll be 111 in about 5 minutes. And
yeah,
I could get peeled.
The point of this is that we have more. There's a point of optimism because we have more potential on our own. Now let's talk just for a second about medication. There are a lot of people out there who, for their mood issues, take medication. Well, what do those medications do? For anxiety, the typical medications, these what's under the umbrella of SSRIs, whatever, basically kind of slow down the neurofiring and basically facilitates the stopping of the thinking. But then you have to pick the ball up from that and say, how do I turn to more positive thoughts?
So even if you have medication and even if you're receiving some sort of therapy, it's still on you as a person. And we have these abilities within us, correct?
No question. So in other words, sometimes the blind spot about medication is, okay, I'll take this and then it's over. Well, actually, the better way to think about it is, this is going to help my brain give me the capacity to really take charge of my thinking and find my happy space, to find my happy thoughts, etc. And so it's a 1-2 punch, if you will. This chemical will help slow down my runaway brain so that I have the energy and the focus, and focus is the big word, as you say, to then take charge. What they now know, Rick, in brain studies and brain imaging, is that when you commit yourself to a practice of thinking throughout the day, going back to it and back to it and back to it. It's hard to do it. But within about 8 weeks, there are noticeable changes in your brain chemistry. In other words, it really does have permanent fixing in your brain with, at the neuron level. And that's great. You really can change yourself with this. You really can.
So in other words, we've all got the ruby slippers on. We just need to know when to click our heels, right?
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. And one of the terms that's gaining, finally, and thank God, gaining help is mindfulness. And mindfulness, when people hear mindfulness, I think there are some people who just instantly think, oh man, that's Eastern stuff. Well, shut up. No, it's not. It really isn't. It's just basically that if the term may bother you, but all it is doing is giving names to these practices of taking care of the organism that God gave you, slowing down, relaxing, finding distractions that will help you, find your composure again to go forward. They used to call it, what's that word? Prayer. Remember that? But as a
Back
Christian
in the
minister,
day,
yeah, right. But as a Christian minister, no one disputes this. What percentage of prayer, I'll bet it's 90%, is basically yearning and begging. Oh, God, do this. Oh, God, help me with that. Oh, sure, do it. Ask and you'll get it. How about prayer that just relaxes and is grateful for the body God gave you and that you're alive? And even if your body is troubled, you can have life.
there's some beautifully written prayers, but one that just says, give me a break a minute, will you? It was not a bad one.
You know what? There's a wonderful. You learn this in seminary. A wonderful. It's the shortest prayer ever. It's from a French cleric, and it's, "Oh God, the ocean is so vast, and my boat is so small."
There you go.
That's
That's
sweet.
perfect. I have told everybody that right now, at least, they're lucky if they can't be around Lafayette and they're remotely located like I am, that they can see the gatherings on Sunday.
Yep, absolutely. And we're remote. It's the gathering, and if you just go to uh, email me at drwillm@mac.com, drwillm@mac.com. Say you want to be put on the list for the Zoom, and I'll put you on our mailing list.
All right, and it's also live on Facebook.
Exactly. We Zoom it and then feed it over to Facebook at the Gathering with Dr. Will Miller on Facebook.
Fantastic.
And I think it's going to get even easier because we're just about to launch our own website. I'll have the with the details on that. That'll make it yet even easier to get there.
Fantastic. Dr. Will, thank you so much for spending some time with us. We appreciate it.
It is always a pleasure.